Right now, we want to show you a live look where hundreds are still out there in the streets of Minneapolis. They were in front of the courthouse for hours today, also in front of the spot where George Floyd lost his life. They were cheering, they were crying, gathered together, still listening to many speakers, including George Floyd's brothers and his attorneys. After 3 weeks of testimony and 45 witnesses, it took less than 10 hours for the jury to reach its verdict.
Chauvin set to be sentenced in 8 weeks. Here's a look at those convictions: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter. And while the most serious charge carries up to 40 years behind bars because Chauvin doesn't have any priors, state law caps that at 12.5 years. The judge could run the sentences concurrent or back-to-back to send a message. He is not eligible for bail.
After he was convicted, Chauvin was put into handcuffs and taken into custody. George Floyd's brother was inside the courtroom as the jury's verdict was read by the judge. Outside, protesters were celebrating a victory. Floyd's girlfriend says she feels a sense of relief.
It'll mean change. It's a first step in a long road to recovery.
The question now is, will today's verdict have any kind of a lasting impact on criminal justice reform? For more on that, we want to get over to Brandon Lee, who joins us live from the newsroom tonight. Brandon.
You know, Heather, before the verdict was read earlier this afternoon, I was watching the coverage all morning long, as many of our viewers were as well, listening to many of those interviews from people out on the street where George Floyd was killed. There was so much anxiety earlier today. Some people felt hopeful of a guilty verdict, but at the same time, they said that they had seen too much injustice in their own lives to have any faith at all in the justice system. So here now to talk about the impact today's verdict will have regarding police reform, we wanted to bring in someone who could give us a little insight as to what will happen next. And here with us tonight is DeWitt Lacy, a civil rights attorney. Mr. Lacy, thanks so much for the time tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all.
Absolutely, Mr. Lacy. We have already kind of covered most of the facts that led to this guilty verdict this afternoon. We wanted to bring you on tonight to talk about where this leads next when it comes to actual police reform. It was the death of George Floyd that led to the massive protest over the summer around the world, demanding reform within the criminal justice system. From your experience, your perspective, will today's guilty verdict have any impact on police reform?
Brandon, I think it will. You know, very shortly after George Floyd's family and his attorneys talked, of course, the president and the vice president addressed the nation. What everybody should consider is that the George Floyd Reform and Policing Act is still something that's at issue, which could very much affect federal reform of policing throughout all 50 states. So I think it will have an impact in that regard. As well, it may encourage some other prosecutors and or police officers to actually stand up for their profession and make sure it deserves and gets the honor that it should.
You know, there were so many people, especially within the black community, who truly felt like this officer would not be found guilty on all counts. They have felt this way because of cases like Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, where they believe, Mr. DeWitt, that justice was not served in those cases. So again, does today's verdict give any hope at all that officers who do abuse the badge will be finally held accountable?
Brandon, I'll tell you, certainly in Hennepin County or in Minnesota, when you have an attorney general like Keith Ellison. But also, again, you know, in places like where I'm at in Los Angeles County, George Gascon, or in San Francisco with the DA there. You know, folks have expressed a real desire for reform. And I think what it does is it encourages folks, that is district attorneys or state's attorneys across the country, to really step up and do the right thing. There's a reason why many black folks and or people of color have a distrust for the system as it was. But given how this prosecution had put on the case, and exhibited courage to go against one of their own, so to speak, it may encourage and serve as a catalyst for many more folks to do that as we go along here.
And just moments ago, we actually heard Vice President Kamala Harris actually talking about Congress getting involved and passing the Justice in Policing Act. Civil rights attorney DeWitt Lacy, thank you so much for the time tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.